This is recording 1A in a series on the quadratic formula for Unit 4, Chapter 4, Section 4-4, if you're keeping track, from Mathematics 2200. We're looking at the quadratic formula, one of the most important formulas in mathematics. This particular recording, though, will focus on where we get that formula from. The next recording will focus on how can you use the formula. We begin by considering the general quadratic equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And we're going to apply the same steps for completing the square that we learned back in the previous section, back in section 4-3. So dividing the equation by the a value, we take all the terms in that equation, divide them by a. And it's just that easy, as they used to say on an old home improvement show. You've got x squared plus b over a x plus c over a equals 0. Now it says group the x squared and bx terms. Well, we're going to call that the b over a x term now because that's our second term. It doesn't just use b anymore. So we've got now x squared plus b over a times x equals negative c over a. So we've done everything those first two steps have asked us to do. We'll move over to the next slide for the next two steps. Okay, I've copied the last step from the previous slide. Now we've got to complete the square, that is create a perfect square trinomial inside their brackets. So we do that by making two blanks. That should be a subtraction there in front of that second blank. Let's fix that. There we go. Equals negative c over a here. Now recall from earlier recordings that a perfect square trinomial has the form x squared plus 2dx plus d squared. So this b over a is twice the value of d that we need. So in other words, we're going to have to divide this by 2 before we square it. And so since we divide this by 2, we'll get b over 2a. And that has to be squared and put in this blank. So we've got b squared over 4a squared. b squared over 4a squared. Now because I can't just add things at random without balancing them off in an equation, I'm going to have to subtract that same amount out, giving us the effect of adding 0 to the equation. Now that I've done that, before I can do the next step, I really have to write this as x squared plus b over a x plus b squared over 4a squared equals, I'll move this negative b squared over 4a squared over to the right hand side, and I've got b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Now I can factor my perfect square trinomial, and remember our d value is actually b over 2a. So we have x plus b over 2a. Because once again, remember, the factors of the perfect square trinomial are x plus the d value squared. So we've got x plus b over 2a squared equals b squared over 4a squared. Now I'd like to have a common denominator right here. So the common denominator is 4a squared, which means I'm going to need to multiply that by 4a over 4a, which will give me 4ac over 4a squared. So I've got x plus b over 2a all squared equals b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. We have another slide to go yet. So I've copied that last step up here. Now we apply the square root property, and therefore x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus, don't forget from the square root property, of b squared minus 4ac all over, and I should make that root sign a little bit bigger, there we go, all over 4a squared. Now I cannot do the square root of the numerator, but I can do the square root of 4a squared. That is 2a. So I've got x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Just another step to go. X equals, because we're trying to isolate the value of x, negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That's our quadratic formula, but it's usually written as x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, because these two fractions had the same denominator. So that's how the quadratic formula is derived. Makes it seem a little more complicated than its use, but it is pretty simple to use. We'll see that in our next recording. Don't forget, to derive the quadratic formula, we just basically follow the same steps as we do for completing the square when solving any quadratic equation by completing the square.